I'm Rob Gaston. I work with Farallon Geographics on arches, amongst other things. I speak for the Farallon crew when I say we're absolutely thrilled to be here. And thanks, obviously, to Phil and Diana and May and everyone at Flax and Teal and everyone at the Getty. Today I'm going to be talking about Arches Controlled List and Arches Lingo, which are two Arches applications that we've been hard at work on for the past year. And you might remember my talk from last year. So this is kind of a follow-up. So as ChatGPT likes to say, let's get into it. Arches RDM. Bit of background before I get into those projects. Arches RDM is, you're probably all familiar with this since 2015 in Arches 3. This has been the solution for managing both thesaurus data, and that is as distinct from the related task of managing controlled lists for Arches resource data entry forms using the concept data type. So you're probably all familiar with this, and I'm sure many of you have used the RDM for one or maybe both of these use cases, and perhaps have recognized that they're a bit distinct. The RDM works well for, I would say, most of the Arches data management requirements, but it does have some limitations in terms of being a true thesaurus data management solution. There's also this thing, the domain data type. It's intended to provide like a really simple way to manage very simple controlled lists. It also has some pretty serious limitations, I would say, that make it less than ideal for what it could be. And the RDM UI is, I think, at this point, a little long in the tooth. It hasn't undergone a significant update since when it was first built. And so because of all this, the Arches RDM, in addition to the concept and domain data types, are being deprecated in version 8. They'll be available in version 8 and then removed in version 9. So we're moving beyond the Arches RDM, and we have these two new applications called Arches Lingo and Arches Controlled Lists that I'm going to be talking about. So first, let's talk about Arches Controlled Lists. So Arches Controlled Lists is an Arches application. It's intended to replace the Arches RDM for the specific purpose of managing controlled lists for your Arches data resource data entry forms. So this is an example of an Arches application that I would say extends core functionality with like a new feature set. This is relevant because Arches Controlled List is that kind of an application. There are applications that are more about like managing a specific kind of resource data. But we envision there'll be more applications like this that are intended to support a specific feature set within Arches. And there already are, actually, in fact, and we'll be talking, the royal we of Farallon folks have talks that are addressing some of those ideas. So what it actually does, what Arches Controlled List actually does or adds is it creates the database schema that we use to manage controlled lists and their entities. So this is sort of the replacement schema for Arches RDM. If you've looked at the Postgres schema for Arches, you'll know that Arches RDM has its own sort of subsection of the schema, and that's being deprecated and replaced with this new controlled list schema. And it also provides a controlled list manager plugin. So that's the plugin that's pictured here. It's a front end that we're using to create and edit controlled lists. So here's a little video of this in action. I'm going to try and kind of narrate this. So this is just looking at some pre-created controlled lists. So this is scheme types, and you can see on the right there, I'm going to highlight, this is where it's reflecting that that's being used in a particular node. It is referencing this list and using it. These are some items in the list, just sort of showing you what the metadata look like. I wanted to be a little meta with it, so I picked controlled lists here, and I'm going to give it a translation, so a preferred label in German, Kontrollierte Listen. You can see there's a URI there that points to the AAT, so that's a key part about controlled list entries is they're defined by a URI. You can add things like images and image metadata. And then, of course, with my translation, I can switch into German mode and see the translated preferred labels when they're available. So that's a little bit about just editing and using the controlled list manager to view controlled lists. In addition to all of that, there's a new data type, which we call the reference data type. This is the data type that's meant to supersede, I guess you could say, the concept and domain data types, as well as the associated widgets. So these are front-end data entry and reporting widgets necessary to actually work with that data type. So here is a little video intended to give you an idea of how you would support a simple list. So yes, no, maybe as a list. I'm just going to try to create this list as quickly as possible to show you just how easy it is. Yes, no, and maybe. And so now I've got a list. And you might notice that the URIs are getting auto-populated. So if I want to use this as I would the domain data type, so sort of a non-specific set of controlled list items, I can just create that. And now, and the URIs will be created automatically. And here I'm creating a model that's going to show you how to actually use that reference data type. So there's a user model. I created a card with user info. I'm going to add a couple nodes here. One for a name. So that's like the username, and I'll use the non-localized string data type, which is a newish data type. And then I'll create a second node, and I'll call that node loves arches, question mark. And I'll use the reference data type, so we can assert yes, no, or maybe about an individual's love for arches. And then if I jump over to the card, you can see what that card looks like. So I could, mock up a little data, Rob, and indeed I love arches. So I can publish that graph, and I'm going to jump back quickly from here to the controlled list manager to show you. Now you can see here, it's actually being implemented in that node. So one of the things that the controlled list manager reflects there is what graphs are using these lists. This is important because you don't want to just kind of willy-nilly go editing or deleting lists without being aware of that. So that's the controlled list manager. And now I'm going to talk about something called Arches Lingo. So Arches Lingo is an Arches application that's built for managing thesauri data. So if you recall, that's the other use case for the RDM that it kind of doesn't fully support, I would say, as semantic models. So that is to say, Arches resource models. So these models were designed by George Brusacker, who many of you probably know from Taken Solutions, as well as Phil Carlisle, who's sitting in the room. And they're using an ontology called LinkedArt Plus that is an extension of the LinkedArt ontology that George has been working on. And this is an example of the other kind of Arches application, broadly speaking, which is an application that's intended to support a specific, like you could say a specific vertical, right? In this case, it's managing thesauri data, and you're actually managing those as resource instance data, right? So this is maybe a kind of Arches application that people would be more familiar with conceptually. So it actually includes those resource models that I described for creating concept hierarchies, related entities, and there's also models for creating other kinds of hierarchies that we envision using in the future. So hierarchies of people and groups, hierarchies of time periods, hierarchies of places. These are data that, authoritative data that can be modeled hierarchically but are distinct from concept hierarchies. And the intention here is that these data that are managed canonically in Lingo would be integrated with systems that leverage authority data for making references to them. An example of that might be the thing I just showed you, Arches controlled lists, right? So in addition to all of that, there is a custom front end, which we call Arches Lingo, that is what would be used by thesaurus data managers or vocabulary data experts to explore and manage those concept entities within the context of these hierarchies. And this front end has really been customized to meet the daily workflows of people who are doing that work. So we spent a good bit of time up front talking with people like Phil Carlisle and his colleagues in the field to try to really directly address those workflows. And that's really why Arch's Lingo is a custom front end. As opposed to using the default Arch's resource editor, we wanted to create, and when I say workflows, I'm talking with a small w, not like Arch's workflows, but actual, an actual front-end solution that is tailored to those users. So quickly, here is a little video of Lingo in action. So I'm going to let this fly, and you'll see we've got the fish archaeological objects thesaurus, courtesy of Phil Carlisle in here. I'm going to click through a few concepts. You can see this is the hierarchy of that thesaurus on the left. I might click through a few of these just to look at what they've got. They're obviously some SCOS-like things, notes and labels, images, associated relationships, hierarchical relationships. So I might want to add a second label. Excuse me, Phil, I'm not trying to actually edit your vocabularies here, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I've heard the word sensor sometimes used for an incense burner, so I thought that was a good one. I don't know, I threw it in there as an alternative label. And so now you can search on that term, so I can search on the alternative label of sensor, and you see I get back incense burner, but oh, hey, there's another concept that's sensor. What's that? I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to editorialize on your vocabularies here, Phil, but maybe, well, maybe I need to merge or do something with that, right? Or let's say I'm looking at crosses, and I see these different kinds of crosses that are represented, and maybe I know about, some other kind of cross that we might want to add. So I can come in here and add a concept, and that creates this interface for me to create a new concept, and I could give it a pref label, like another kind of cross. I didn't actually know of another kind of cross off the top of my head. And we'll specify that as a pref label and save that. And now I've got a new concept, another kind of cross, and it's sitting there in the hierarchy under crosses, or crossed. Let's say, for instance, I decided incense spoon is actually a kind of incense holder. Again, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm probably wrong. I could move that. So this is an example of changing hierarchical position. So I removed the original hierarchical parent, because these are polyhierarchical data, importantly, so you can have multiple hierarchical parents. And I change it to incense holder, and I save that. And now you can see incense spoon is now, it's maybe subtle on the left, is now a child of incense holder. So that's like a quick example of some vocabulary editing tasks as facilitated in the Arch's Lingo front end. There's a lot of work still to be done here, that's the focus right now is on, like I said, supporting those workflows for the vocabulary editing community. So importantly, these two applications are interesting because we're really leveraging Arch's 8 and related applications, a lot of like new features. So these applications, the application you just saw, as well as the controlled lists, are built using Vue.js TypeScript. So we're leaning towards the future. Christopher is going to talk a bit about style guides and sort of how we're turning that corner slowly, if not, immediately. There's this thing called the Arch's Component Lab, which is where we're building new Vue components for working with Arch's data. It's kind of a holding ground for these things, and we don't know exactly where that's going to land, but we needed a place to put these things while we're while multiple different projects are working on them. And so again, this is open source. I have links at the end. Feel free to start using Arch's Component Lab if you're interested. It's obviously in development, but we would be happy to have more people looking at and using that. The bulk data manager, which you're probably familiar with, has been evolving, and we're using that actually for pulling data from the RDM into these new systems, so into the Lingo models, as well as pulling data from the RDM into controlled lists. Jonathan is on right after me, and he's going to be talking about what that actually looks like. There's a cool Arch's application that we've called Arch's query sets, which is really a data access layer that provides a sort of Django native way to access your Arch's data in a more semantic way. And we're using that in conjunction with Django REST framework to create the APIs for Arch's Lingo, which I think is a cool approach. And Jacob's going to be talking a bit about what Arch's query sets is and how it actually works. There's a feature in Arch's 8, which is graph versioning. This allows us to version graphs over time and have actual business data that are aware of what version of the graph they are, have been minted from. We're using that in Lingo to actually going forward to actually migrate models. So we anticipate that over time, there may be changes to models that we need to implement, and we'll be implementing those as migrations, Django migrations, that is, taking advantage of this graph versioning work that allows us to identify what version particular data sets are of. There's this feature of resource life cycles, which Christopher talked about, I believe, in the online developer meeting earlier this year. Some of you may have seen that. It's a cool feature, and it allows for customizable life cycles to be implemented against resource data, and importantly, function hooks to actually implement some logic while resources move through their life cycle. So this is important for Lingo because we need to actually manage what you would call publishing thesauri, and that's actually a lifecycle change, but it also needs to cascade down from a scheme to all the concepts that participate in that scheme. And then we're actually using PostgreSQL to do the search functions, which is different. We're not using Elasticsearch at all in Lingo at the moment. I sort of doubt that we will, but maybe we'll get there. Cyrus has some discussion of a related topic there. For later. So some of the big challenges that we face in this, you've probably already picked up that application design and composition is a bit of a challenge. We're still trying to figure out, like, when do you make a new application? How do you draw those lines? What features go where? And always trying not to duplicate effort or fork where we don't need to. Performance is always a consideration. Some of the thesaurus data that we've got in hand that we're testing with are quite large. So we've been contending with that, which is good. We are, in the case particularly of controlled lists, we're still in the kind of awkward corner of having to contend with two front-end frameworks. So like I said, we're using Vue.js and TypeScript, but the Chrome around it is all knockout, and so that's a bit of an awkward spot, like I said. But towards that end, we're trying to establish a style guide. Like I mentioned, Christopher's going to talk about that. Working with Prime Vue has been, in turns, great and then tragic. I mean, it's like any, I think, front-end UI library in that way. It's good when you're just trying to do the default things, and then when you try to do a little bit more, it can grate a bit. And then in the case of controlled lists, we still have this monolithic SCSS file that impacts all of our styles down to the Vue app that's sort of a controlled list plugin, and that's obviously something that we have to just contend with. More sort of conceptual, we're trying to create reusable code as we're going through Lingo, but we're also trying to create Lingo, which is a bespoke set of software. And so, there's some tension there, but we know that we're kind of treading new ground, and we want to make sure that as much as possible we're providing reusable code. And then, there's all these existing patterns in arches, like the way that widgets and data types interact, and there's some tension between just implementing those as they've evolved and trying to sort of explore new ground. Quickly, what's next? For Arch's Lingo, we're working on, like I said, the lifecycle stuff, publishing schemes and concepts, importing and exporting data using RDF Thesaurus XML. managing URIs and persistent friendly identifiers, improving the search capabilities. I'm talking about the search capabilities actually inside of Lingo, and then integrating with controlled lists, like I said. Controlled lists, we want to support hierarchical search like you currently have with the RDM. I think we're going to evolve to support some additional metadata, which maybe kind of nods towards some of what Cyrus is going to talk about. And then we want to load data from Arch's Lingo. This is, again, the integration. We want to be able to pull data into controlled lists from Arch's Lingo to make references to those things. And then we envision the need for some bulk data management tools around the reference data type specifically to keep things in sync between multiple controlled lists and business data. This is the roadmap. You can find that on the website. I don't need to linger on this, but the point is much of this is getting released alongside Arch 8 in June, right around the corner, including controlled lists, and then Lingo will be a couple months later in August. And with that, thank you all for your attention, and I'll take any questions. Here are some links to the application repos, some of which I mentioned. Sure.
I have two questions. One, what I didn't see in your demo is that you facilitate to see who made which edits. So if someone makes a change, that you can actually see that and do you facilitate discussion? Because what I often find by these things is that, what I often find is that someone says this is a good idea, and then someone wants to say, okay, I want to roll it back or to do something. So that was question one. And second, are you still planning to do distributed lingo so that you can actually have multiple lingos collaborate together and pool data in?
The second question, I think, but I'm not sure about the timeline for that. Like, yeah. So that's, I'll just say I think. So, but for the first question, we have all that data on the back end as per Arches, right? We aren't at the point in the front end of exposing that, but we will certainly be exposing the edit log for those purposes. The discussion point is an interesting one. I have to talk with the group about it. But I know in seeing some of the work that vocabulary editors do, they will frequently sort of isolate some of their data in these little holding grounds for that kind of exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, like working out what's going to become canonical data and then kind of merging it over into the canonical scheme. And it's an interesting idea. I don't think we've really talked about specifically facilitating like a discussion within the application, but I like it. Phil. Oh.
Just add to that. So I think in mock early. Do I really need the mic? In early mock-ups, there is a dashboard that can show you that, so that as an editor I can go in and see who's edited what recently and who's working on which vocabulary. So that, I hope that is going to survive.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So
that's more of a high-level view.
Yeah. So the feedback I'm often getting is that why can't I do things like issue tracking for like what we do with source code, so that they basically can say, okay, we need to add something to it. Here's an issue. We have a discussion about it. We can see what it is, and then finally resolve it. And I think that's a very useful pattern to take things which allow us to collaborate with code to give them to the customers as well.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. It's not on the roadmap for August 15th, obviously, but I think it's a great idea. Rob.
Just sorry to interrupt, but just to mention if you can use the mic just for the recording, that'll be handy. It's always one, Phil. Always one.
Okay, I'm just interested in the choice of linked art as the ontology. Where did that?
You're looking at the right guy. Yeah. Or maybe not the writer guy.
You're looking at the right guy, Jason. So George chose it basically because it gives us the flexibility to model the data really, really well, rather than just limiting ourselves to something like SCOS or SCOS Excel or ISO FES. It allows us to add more information. The Getty vocab program were really keen on being able to look at a concept and know exactly that, who'd edited it, where the source came from, what the warrants were, and LinkedArt Plus, actually, so it's even bigger than LinkedArt Plus, gives us that ability to add in all that extra information rather than just, here's the concept, here's the label, here's the relationships.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it, if I can remember what I was going to say, and I can't think now, so I won't. There you go.
Well, it's sort of related to Schwert's point, and you didn't see it in the demo, but there is a place to put like warrant assertion data as you're editing labels and stuff like that. It's not quite what you're describing, but it at least has some, it's a way to provide some, I don't know.
Yeah, and I've just remembered what it was. And it allows us as well to sort of like, we can publish the data in either that really detailed form, or we can shrink it down into an ISOFES form, or we can shrink it down into just a SCOS form. So it allows us to publish the data however we want it, depending on which person's receiving that data, as it were. That's why it probably looks ridiculously over-engineered, the models, but it fulfills the need that was given to us.
Maybe time for one more question. Kevin?
Quick, silly question. The video demo for Lingo, what was the playback speed on that? Like normal, or was that sped up?
It was normal. Did I go too fast?
No, I mean, it was pretty quick, and
Yeah.
I just wondered
Yeah.
if, just out of my curiosity.
Yeah, no,
I'm not saying it was too fast for a demo. I just wanted to know, like, the reality of
Is
that.
this a realistic server?
in reality, yeah, that was in real time.
Awesome, thank you.
Maybe I tried it too many times and got twitchy, but too much coffee. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, Rob.
Yep, thank you.
That was really interesting.